Hello, hello. Hope you folks can hear me, see me. Hello, it's Zell. Good to see you again. I think Vanessa had joined a while back for moderation. I see Andy Birch from Omaha. Hello, Andy. Yeah, thanks for confirming that you can hear me. Yeah, I don't know if I'm looking good or if the green screen is. I actually just got done with the stream, so I'm lazy to bring this thing down every day, so it stays up. And I'm actually on a single, it's the green screen itself. It stays up, lets me do virtual backgrounds, or like when I'm streaming, it just disappears. So I take less of the screen real estate. So I'm on a single machine right now because I want to show you a few things on a single computer. So hopefully this does not cause, like what I meant was like I have an ultra-wide monitor, but I'm not projecting. Yeah, Vanessa, thank you for confirming. So it is noon, so I think we can get started. Well, noon Eastern time. I'm in East Coast time. Okay, so if I switch here and if I start this up, let me see how this is looking for you. Can anyone confirm if they can see my deck in the chat room, please? So I'm guessing like when I'm not looking at just that browser tab, it is smart enough to not do the effect of like till eternity. Yes, okay, thank you, Nikita. Okay, all right, so I think we can get started. And like I said, I'm not actually looking at myself since I am looking at a single monitor. So if you have any issues, please say so in the chat and I will adjust accordingly. Okay, so it's a little over 1 minute past 12, so I will get started. I'm on East Coast time, and I think we go 45 minutes if I'm not mistaken. So I'll try to cram in as much as I can in 45 minutes. It's a short amount of time. Don't worry about the slide decks. All of that we shared. Let's have a conversation. I'm going to jump around a bunch of different technologies over the next 45 minutes. Not to confuse you, but hopefully to get you some ideas of how you can code share between different platforms. So let's get started. My name is Sam Basu. I am a developer advocate for a company called Progress Software. If you are a .NET or a JavaScript developer, maybe you know us from some of the things we make, which is all of the Telerik UI tools, Kenda UI, Fiddler. We make a lot of different things to make developers more successful. That is my social handle for just about anywhere. So Twitter, GitHub, Skype, you name it. So even after we are done, please feel free to reach out and we can have a conversation. All right, so let's talk about XAML, which by the nature of it makes me old, and I am old. I've been doing this for a long, long time, so I've seen a lot of things rise and die with time, and that's part of how technology works. So I'm probably going to try to give you a high-level overview of what is XAML, what are some things you can do with it. It is not old like some people might suggest. It is actually very much alive and kicking, and it takes you places in terms of how many platforms you can reach. So that's a good place to be. All right, so first up, big thank you to all of the sponsors, and welcome everybody to HDC again. I know you've heard welcome a few times already this morning. HDC remains one of my favorite conferences to go to, favorite regional conferences. I love going out there in Omaha. I love the venue. So, but this is the year that we're all living through. Don't be fooled by my shirt. I'm wearing PJs, as I'm sure many of you are. So I'm home. I mostly work out of home, and at least with virtual platforms like this, we can get together and we can still talk about the things that we are passionate about. So thank you to all the sponsors that are making HDC happen. And I know Itzel, Vanessa, Nikita, and so many folks have put in so much effort to make this day happen. So thank you all. We appreciate you. Okay, so since we're all remote, I have been a remote worker for like 10 plus years now, but this feels very different. I have a kid who's actually home. Schooling isn't happening in our neck of the woods yet. Well, it's starting to happen in small amounts. But I live in a little town called Erie, Pennsylvania, right up by Lake Erie, our 5 Great Lakes. There is a little town called Erie, Pennsylvania. Wife's a college professor. I work from home, but that's where I am at. And you are somewhere right here. So I have been to HDC probably 4 or 5 times in the last few years. So I travel a lot, not this year. So I'm used to hopping over to Chicago and then catching a flight to Omaha. So hopefully many of you are from Omaha. I love the city. I love where you are. And the rest of you joining in from the rest of the US or other parts of the world. So yeah, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you. Okay, so let's talk about XAML. I'm going to take a quick look here. Elkhorn, Nebraska. Good morning. Yep. All right. So I think we are still good. Everyone can see my screen. Okay. So like I said, we have 45 minutes, not a whole lot of time, but let's try to get an overview of where things started and what are some platforms that support XAML today. So the first time we actually saw XAML, it is a markup language. It is a way for us to, it's kind of exactly like XML, which is extensible markup language, except this one is catering to specific platforms. The first time we saw it was back in 2006, I believe. Microsoft was doing .NET, and WPF came out for the first time, which is Windows Presentation Foundation, still around and kicking. That's the way for building desktop applications. And we, for the first time, saw XAML in how we define the visual tree, the UI part of your application. And since then, XAML has grown. It's very simple in its essence, and what it provides is a nice ecosystem. So you can extend things, you have very good tooling, no matter what type of app you're building. So it's a good place to be. It's a simple start, and it grew. What happened, though, over the last like 12 plus years, is 12 or 14 years now, is there was no one team or one organization that owned XAML. And that was kind of by design. It was meant to be flexible. So each platform took XAML and did their own thing, which eventually led to a little bit of fragmentation. Like there are a couple of flavors of XAML that we're dealing with. None too different from each other, but there are some differences. Like some of it can be annoying, but again, once you learn one, you can move around between the others. So since we are talking about XAML, pretty much everything is on top of .NET. I talked a little bit about JavaScript as well, but we're going to stick to .NET. So many of you probably are .NET developers or JavaScript developers, or you're wanting to see where you can cross over. Let's talk about the .NET ecosystem a little bit. Some of these are Microsoft slides. So you can see that .NET has evolved quite a bit. Again, in the last 5 years in particular, it's not just for Windows. It's not just one gigantic .NET framework. It's for multiple platforms. So this is .NET as we know today. This purple box, this is what is the .NET framework that we have been used to for the last 17 years. It's very much okay and going to live for a long time. .NET Core is about 5 or 6 years old. This is, for the first time, it's lean and it's cross-platform. It's not the gigantic framework anymore, and it's outside of Windows. It runs on Linux. It runs on Mac, so it's nice. And then Mono is another port of .NET that's almost about 15 years old, very rich ecosystem. Mono first tried taking .NET out of Windows, and Xamarin was an acquisition from Microsoft back in 2016. And Xamarin runs on Mono, and that's what takes your .NET code to iOS, Android, and other devices. So with today's .NET, you really can target a lot of platforms, and a lot of it is with XAML. And the tools of our trade here, they have evolved as well. It's not just Windows, Visual Studio on Windows. I use VS for Mac a lot. I use Visual Studio Code a lot. So everything is welcome. This is .NET as we are heading into this November. Like I said, there is a little bit of fragmentation, not just with XAML, but with .NET as well. So they're trying to combine. This is a unification effort. So by November, you're going to see .NET 5 come out, and it essentially combines the best parts of Mono and best parts of .NET Core, puts it all together, and .NET Framework runs fine as well. So essentially, developers will be given a seamless experience, or that's the hope. And we get to choose the runtime, or the platforms that you're building for will choose their own runtime. So it's a more seamless experience for .NET devs. So this is coming up in the horizon, and it's exciting. Now, everything that we talk about today is open source. There is no barrier to entry. There is nobody that you have to pay. All the tools are free. So all of the XAML frameworks that we'll talk about today, everything is free and open source. So it's a very open, collaborative, and rich place you're coming into. So what I want to do is break this down for you in terms of mobile, desktop, and web, in terms of the frameworks or the platforms you normally target or you build for with XAML. And we're going to look at what XAML can do in each of these things. I mean, there are other things like IoT or other AR, VR. Let's talk about like three basic things. And actually, we can go to AR, VR a little bit as well. Okay, quick look at the chat room. We're good. Okay, so yeah, please feel free to chime in the chat room and comment on whatever that you want. Okay, let's talk about mobile real quick. So this is my 1-minute spiel on all things mobile. It's 2020. You can do a lot of different things, which is great for developers. If you are up to it, and if you really want to build like a game that's close to the metal, go build a native app, which is this stack here. So iOS, Android, and Windows. And by Windows, I don't mean Windows Phone. I mean all other Windows devices. That's been dead many times over. So do that, but it's expensive. It's 3 different code bases towards a single app. So it's hard to maintain for a single developer. It's harder for enterprises. So we are talking about cross-platform solutions today. And when it comes to cross-platform solutions, we can do a couple of different things. Oh, and by the way, let's see. I might run through the slides in probably 20, 25 minutes, and then I want to show you some demos in the last like 15 minutes. Okay, so if you are doing web stuff, right? So keep on doing the web stuff. You can do a lot of different things. This mobile web part of it is where your website becomes a good citizen on a mobile form factor. There are lots of frameworks that help you out, SWA frameworks like Angular, Bootstrap, Vue, you name it. Blazor is in there. We make an open source thing called Kenda UI. So there's a lot of help to make things touch friendly. And your mobile websites can be a very good citizen on mobile form factors if you are careful and if you are truly building a PWA, which is a progressive web application. This is where your user can pin your website to their home screen. You can send them a push notification. You can have service workers running in the background. It's a really good experience. So do that. But if you would rather be in the app stores, then you have to think about other options. We used to do the hybrid option for a while. This is PhoneGap or Apache Cordova. I don't recommend this anymore because, again, I mean, it may be an okay solution for like simple line of business applications, but it is running inside of a web shell. So it's not the fastest thing in the world. And if you are using JavaScript or TypeScript or web technologies like CSS or HTML, why build a hybrid app when you can actually build a native app? And that's where this JavaScript native story has really become very popular in the last few years. You get frameworks like NativeScript or NativeScript with Angular or with React Native. All of these will do exactly the same thing. You write some JavaScript or HTML. At runtime, it renders native UI and native performance. Use what you get. You get complete access to all of the APIs, so it's a good place to be. And then we talk about some of the cross-compiled options, which is where Xamarin fits in, which is where Uno platform fits in, which is where Flutter fits in. So all of these are higher level languages, and you're compiling them down into native binaries or iOS or Android or other devices. So that's the mobile landscape right now. Lots of choices, and that's a good thing. Let's talk about Xamarin a little bit more since we are still in the mobile land. So Xamarin makes it super easy for .NET devs to build truly native cross-platform apps. And the way they do it is with a few tricks up their sleeve with the technology stack. So this is where we started. If you're building, if you're a C# or .NET dev, you get to build a shared business logic layer, and then you build the heads for each of the platforms that you want to support. This was a good first step, but you still needed to know how to build for iOS and Android or Windows. Then came Xamarin Forms, which gave you an abstraction right here, which is shared. And this is great because as a .NET developer, I don't need to learn a lot about iOS. If I need to, I can always go do native stuff, but at least you have an abstraction. You have a good starting point on how to build your code. And this abstraction layer is in XAML, right? So you get to write things in a shared way. And then at runtime, you get corresponding native UI bits on each platform that you support. So this is a great starting point. Let's talk about Xamarin Forms a little bit more, because that's where XAML really comes in. What you're doing with Xamarin Forms is building the visual tree in XAML, and you have lots of ammunition to do it. You have pages, you have controls, you have layouts, a type of design pattern that works really well with almost every XAML development is MVVM, model view view model. Some of it is actually baked into Xamarin Forms. So you get navigation, you get DI and messaging and all of that good stuff. So again, it's a very productive place to be. Some things, looks like my formatting is a little off here. Or maybe the resolution is squishing it. So you get a bunch of things out of the box. Like most mobile apps are a collection of pages. So you get a bunch of different pages and you get a bunch of different layouts as to how you want to stack your controls inside of your pages. Then you get a bunch of controls. And this is obviously not the whole list. There's probably 30 plus controls that you get. And that's just from Microsoft. But then the community and everybody else steps in and gives you more controls. So every one of these things is an abstraction. So when you write a button, it's just going to be a button in XAML. But then at runtime, you get the native iOS button or the Android button. And you get to also customize the renderer, which is rendering that native button. So lots of options. Here's a quick snippet of how things look like in XAML with Xamarin Forms in particular. So what you're trying to write is a page, and this one here is a tabbed page. Notice how the tabs show up here at the bottom for iOS, at the top for Android. And essentially, you're writing things like, here's a stack layout. A stack layout is just like stacking things vertically or horizontally. This one here, it has 2 entry and 1 button. And we are writing things in plain XAML, but at runtime, this is a native iOS button or a text box, right? So that's the benefit that you get. You write XAML, and then you render native stuff. Okay, how do you get access to all of the sensors that are on your phones? Simple. There are plugins, there are components. You can use multiple open source ones. This one is from Microsoft, does most of the things. And you're writing plain C#. So you don't have to know about iOS or like Objective-C or Swift or Java for that matter. You can just write C# and you get full access. Now, this is where things get a little interesting because Xamarin Forms is also open source now. So it is XAML, and then we can write renderers for other things. So this is where we started writing renderers for iOS and Android. But then the community has stepped up and written more renderers for other things. So now Xamarin Forms works on a Mac OS. It works on GTK Linux. It works on WPF back on Windows desktop. Tizen is an operating system that Samsung makes. If you're using a fridge or a TV running Samsung, it most likely is, or made by Samsung, it most likely is running Tizen. I think the Samsung Gear watches run Android, but otherwise everything else pretty much runs Tizen. And we are seeing XAML slowly come back to the web as well, so we'll talk about it a little bit more. But this is a good story with Xamarin Forms. Now, Xamarin Forms is evolving into what's called Maui, and you're going to see this like buzzword all over. It's kind of cute. Goes back to the Maui Islands in Hawaii. And this is kind of making Xamarin Forms a more baked-in citizen within .NET. So they're moving some namespaces around, but nothing really changes for Xamarin Forms developers. You can still do XAML, and you can still do target iOS, Android, but you also get to target Mac and Windows. What this does is it opens the funnel for a few other development choices as well. You can do an MVU design pattern instead of just MVVM, and you can bring in some web technologies. But again, if you just want to keep on doing XAML, then nothing changes for you. You can keep doing so in Maui. This is coming next year, actually, so it's got a good runway to go to get this right. But you can start seeing previews of this coming out this year. Again, more of what I just said. Again, you get platform support with .NET MAUI. They are simplifying like the projects and how the developer experience is. It's a single project as compared to like 5 different projects, which is what we do in Xamarin Forms today. So the whole experience gets a little faster, gets a little better, but otherwise it is Xamarin Forms. Okay, so that's my quick spiel with mobile and XAML. Let me take a look. Maui, love it. Yes, Amanda Brent. Yeah, I'm loving Maui too. I will try to show you some demos maybe of what this is going to shape up to be. But yeah, it's a catchy name they got onto. Okay, let's talk about desktop, right? And desktop by no means should be looked upon as legacy, because desktop is what runs a lot of businesses. So we have to care for this and how we build for it. So let's go back to WPF, which is where XAML started. And WPF and the XAML ecosystem today is very, very rich. We don't have to build desktop applications like we did back in 2007, 2008. I don't know if I mentioned I'm old. I've been doing this for a while. So I spent a lot of time in every one of these like XAML technologies and platforms. So you can build absolutely stunning WPF apps today. You can have full touch support. You can have ink support. So if you have like a kiosk at a station or whatever, it can all be WPF. And you have lots and lots of great APIs. We build a whole bunch of tools for WPF. So there is a lot of UI help in this ecosystem. And the XAML that you get and the tools that you get for building WPF apps, that's probably the richest of them all, because that's the most matured ecosystem of them all. But that's not the only thing. You can also do Universal Windows Platform, or they call it UWP. This is the Windows platform, which is universal within Microsoft Universal only. But that's quite a lot of devices. You get to run your UWP apps on Xbox or HoloLens or Surface Hub, which is that big 80-inch TV, which helps you collaborate. It runs everywhere, single SDK that runs everywhere. They are trying to, or they are in the middle of upgrading the UI stack a little bit with Xamarin, with what's called WinUI. So they're separating the UI from Windows 10 runtimes, so they can ship the UI stack quicker, and it's not as tied to Windows. But again, UWP is a great story if you're doing XAML. And everything that you do with .NET Core 2 and then 3 came out. So all of your desktop applications run just fine on .NET Core. So just because you're doing WinForms at WPF does not mean that you have to go do stuff on .NET Framework. You can absolutely run on .NET Core 3, which is where we want to be. It's modern. I think we're at like 3.1. This is a little bit of Apple landscape. So this is in the works, and what they're doing is Apple has a similar problem. Everybody wants to build for iOS. Not many people want to build Mac desktop applications on the Mac App Store. Sorry, I think I'm getting like allergies. I've been out a little bit this morning. But what we are doing is we are getting iOS apps to run on Mac as a desktop. And that's a fun story, because all of these iOS apps can be written, or iPad apps can be written with XAML or Xamarin Forms. And essentially, they have like half a dozen or so apps running on Mac. And you have more of real estate, more surface area to render your app UI. So eventually, all iOS apps will start running on Mac, which gives you a bigger audience, obviously, to target. So that's a good place to be. So that's with desktop. Let's talk about web a little bit. The web stuff is interesting because I did a little bit of this, which is Silverlight. So we're not supposed to say the S word anymore nowadays, because this hurts. A lot of people were invested in it. And we know the story, like Steve Jobs said, Flash is not going to run on an iPad because it makes it heated. And it's got some security vulnerabilities, which was very true. But the whole plugin model of the web just kind of died. And it was never meant to scale. But the dev experience with Silverlight was actually very good. And that was thanks to XAML. So we actually could get some of that love back in XAML. And that is thanks to this new thing called WebAssembly. This is a new standard. No one company or one browser owns it. It's a binary, almost an assembly-like standard that your browser can execute natively at runtime, which means now you can have higher level languages write code or programs that can be compiled down into WebAssembly, and then your browser can execute that, which is exactly what they do with JavaScript. The JavaScript engines in all our modern browsers, that's exactly what they do. So now you have parity with JavaScript in terms of performance. And this opens it up to like C and C++ and even C# and F# and Rust, all of these higher level languages to now get to be compiled down into WebAssembly, which is exciting. So you may have heard about a thing called Blazor. This has nothing to do with XAML, but it has implications for what we do. Blazor is a new web framework from Microsoft, and it is C# front and back. It started out being server-side, maintaining a shadow DOM with a signal-R connection between the client and the server. But starting like this May, it has gone fully client-side. So it's running fully on WebAssembly. And this is literally C# running in your browser. And you're executing .NET DLLs in the browser, which is quite fantastic. They're still very early days, but then you get to write truly native C#-based applications in the browser. And it's all going through a few things. It is getting compiled through Mono and the IL and then LLVM optimization and then into WebAssembly. But what Blazor lets you do is not just for the web. You can also build progressive web applications with Blazor, which is great because now you can have mobile websites that run completely on your mobile devices. And you can also do Xamarin Forms through Blazor. It's not quite WebAssembly, but you're rendering native mobile apps with Blazor. So it is XAML under the covers, except you never see it. You write it through Blazor and the component model. And then Blazor also shows up on the desktop as well with Electron or some other lightweight web frameworks where you can render like your Slack or your Visual Studio Code or Microsoft Teams. Those are all web applications that are running on your desktop, right? So you can do the same thing with Blazor. So lots of choices. I actually live close to Canada, and across the pond, well, not a pond, lake, is Toronto and then Montreal. There are some very smart folks who have written up a framework called Uno Platform. This is where you see a little bit of that XAML fragmentation. So Xamarin Forms XAML is a little different from WPF or UWP XAML. If you wanted to use the Windows XAML, then you use Uno Platform, and they can, I mean, you can see that they are using Mono and Xamarin under the covers, but then they take you to iOS or Android, and their WebAssembly implementation is actually very, very good at this point. So again, more choice of XAML going everywhere. Okay, questions so far? No, all right, let's go, keep going. XAML tooling. Let's talk about a little bit about XAML tooling and where things are. This is kind of makes things comfortable for us. So we talked about MVVM a little bit. This is a design pattern: model, view, and view model. Three aspects of how we tie things together. The model is your data or your services. The view is just what the user sees. It's supposed to be thin, and the view model is the orchestrator between the model and the view. And this is something that works time and again very well with XAML applications and XAML frameworks. Some of it is actually baked in, but if you wanted to get help, if you're working on a big team, then you might want to get an MVVM framework on, so you get some of this boilerplate code. So there's this is MVVM Lite, this is MVVM Cross, this is Prism. If you're doing WPF or if you're doing Xamarin Forms, just go get that framework. It'll give you some of that templates and some of the boilerplate code, so you can keep things nice and separated. It's all about separation of concerns. It's all about testability of your code. And you get that with some of the frameworks. There are some new things we are also trying to do. This whole MVU design pattern is new to XAML developers in particular, but it's very popular with other developers. This kind of started with Elm, the programming language and the architectural patterns, and it's been adopted by like a little bit of React. A little bit of Blazor actually uses the MVU. So this is a similar but slightly different model of way of thinking it. In this case, the model is not just your data or your services. It's actually the state of your application, and you can have multiple models. The view is what the user sees. That's the UI part of it. So the model tells the view to go render some things, and then based on anything changes in the view, the user does some things or you do some things programmatically, you're supposed to have an update loop. So you update the model, And if need be, you can keep multiple versions of the model around, and that's your application state. And when the application state changes, then the UI has to change, right? So it is one-way data binding, but in a way it's a circular loop, and it's in a way it's simpler than MVVM. I'll show you maybe a little framework called Comet that uses MVU, and this is kind of going to be maturing into one other option for .NET MAUI when it comes around. So you will always be able to do XAML and MVVM, but if you are inclined towards doing MVU with C# or other programming languages, you should be able to. That's the goal. We again, I'm old, so we used to use a tool called Blend quite a bit. It used to be a standalone thing outside of Visual Studio, but now it's kind of baked into Visual Studio. You may not always have Blend. You can see a couple of screenshots that I have here. You actually have to explicitly choose to get Blend. What it gives you is just more ammunition on how to work with your XAML. One of the downsides of XAML is sometimes it gets a little verbose, it gets a little long, and Blend will do some of the automation for you, like how your UI changes state based on how the user is clicking on things. You can do all of that automation inside of Blend, and it's a very good tool. XAML standard, I almost don't want to talk about this because I don't think it's actually happening. It's extremely a difficult problem to solve. You can see that there are a few different kind of languages or dialects of XAML, right? So this one here is Xamarin Forms. You can see this one is label versus this one is a text block. This is UWP or Windows XAML. Entry or button, text box, entry, just some annoying differences. It's the same. Once you know one, you can do the other one. But there was an attempt to kind of bring them all together into a standard language, but this has gotten some roadblocks because it's a difficult thing to solve. Xamarin Forms is very much catered towards mobile form factors, while everything else is for desktop. So it's hard to make everybody come to the same page. So we talked about all the different platforms. Just a quick mention, we make all of the Telerik UI controls for all of your .NET things, Kendo UI for all things JavaScript. But like for XAML, there are some UI suites that we make, one for Xamarin. These are all the things that are really hard to do by hand. Your charts, your graphs, your data grids, your calendars, all of that is out there. And again, I'm obviously biased since I make these products, but there are other products around which are equally capable that give you the UI, but again, it comes down to what works for you, what works for your application and your enterprise or your indie developer needs. Pick something, because otherwise you will be reinventing all of this UI by hand, which is a lot of engineering. Again, if you're building WPF apps, all of the matured UI, everything is at your fingertips to light up. Same with UWP, same with WinUI. There's a lot of love for XAML. Okay. I am exactly 15 minutes out. So any questions from any of you? No? All right. Please feel free to chime in. Chime in if you need to, if you have questions or just concerns, or if you just want to say, no, this is not right. That's totally cool. Okay, let's step out of PowerPoint and show you some demos. So like I said, I'm on a Mac. I also do have a Windows machine just under my desk. I switch around, and I do have a virtual machine as well. So let me show you a little bit of code here. Let me start with Xamarin Forms, and I'll show you some flexibility. For you folks, it's getting 11:30, so it's getting close to your lunchtime, hopefully. I'm not the one standing between you and lunch, so if you have to run out and get something, please do. Okay, so this one here, let me change my startup project. So you'll notice that this is kind of a standard way in which we do Xamarin Forms applications. There's a standard project, which is a .NET Standard library. Then we have iOS or Android or other projects. Tizen is also very welcome if you're doing like targeting Samsung. But what I'm trying to show you is just simple like one-on-one stuff. So here I'm trying to pull down some data. So for mobile apps, your Hello World apps is, can I go to the cloud, bring down some data and show it? So that's what this is. Here's my endpoint. This is just an open RESTful endpoint that gives us some JSON back. JSON is the language of kind of flattening things out over the wire and sending it back and forth. This is my app setup, nothing special. I'm just starting on this page. That's my first page, main page. Then I have a quick little object that describes the thing that I'm getting back from the cloud. And I can actually show you real quick here. If I go to this URL here, that's what I'm hitting. So this one here is the posts. So if I hit this URL, it's small, but you can see like I get some JSON back, and it's actually in Latin, so it makes it a little more fun. Okay. Oh, I see some comments. Some viewers, if you double click on the screen share, yes, you can maximize the screen. We took over some XAML code from a contractor. We found that there needs to be 26 places where the code needs to be changed. Yeah, this is difficult. Like I want to say like you want to start with an edit and replace, but you don't know like what you don't know. So you may have to kind of go with a fine tooth comb and see what you're breaking as you go along, right? So yeah, I don't know if I can help with maximizing my screen, but each of you, like the lower screen, which is the desktop, you can maximize that so you see more. So yes. Dan, I wish I had an easier answer for you, but sometimes you just have to do the due diligence to make sure you're not breaking namespaces, you're not breaking anything else. So start with the replace and see what you broke and go from there. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is another C# file here that uses HTTP GET, and it just goes and fetches that data down. This is the GET call, and then I have a little bit of XAML. So this is how XAML looks like. This is XAML specific to Xamarin Forms. Any other XAML looks very similar. So everything is like a tag, and these tags have special meanings on the platforms they run on. This one here has a search bar. It starts out with a stack layout, which stacks things vertically, and then I have a list view, and I'm trying to show the title part of each of those things that are coming back. So the code behind part of this essentially goes out and fetches the data, and then it sets the item source property on my list view to the data that I get back. So that's it. This is super simple. Let me go ahead and run this. And since this is Xamarin Forms and I'm running on a Mac, it knows that I have Xcode, and it knows how to go do the build. It's actually a native app that you're building. So this is putting it up on the iOS simulator running iOS 14, which if you have an iOS device, I hope you're running iOS 14. It's pretty nice. So this is data coming back from the cloud. Hello world, I get it. There's a search box, so I can filter it if you want. So that's just kind of hello world. This is how Xamarin works, and the same exact code will work on Android just fine, and it'll work on Tizen and other platforms. So now, just to kind of show you the flexibility, what I can do here is I can switch my startup project, and I will run this again. But now, as like the name indicates here, my startup project is now a Mac. So now I get the same exact application, same exact list of posts that are coming back from that URL, and I have my search box, except now this is a desktop application. I can maximize this. I can dock it, so it's full on a Mac desktop application. And the way I did it is not writing a single line of Mac code. So there's an app delegate file that sits out here in the Mac. The only thing we're doing here is naming up a window, giving it some dimensions, and then once the window launches, we are going to say, hey, storyboards or Cocoa Pods, don't do your thing. This is forms.init. This is how we new up Xamarin Forms, and we're loading up the Xamarin Forms application state and the whole object, and we're letting that paint the window. So that's how you get a native Mac desktop application without changing a line of code from your Xamarin Forms, which is pretty nice. Okay, so I have 9 minutes left. This is going to be tight. Let's see, what else can I show you? Let me show you. Let me show you Blazor real quick. So with Blazor, you get a variant of sort of XAML. You're writing the Blazor component model. It looks a little different, but it's about the same thing. So here you have import statements. You have app.cs, like how your app starts up looks a little different. But this is doing like services and DI containers right here. And then you're pointing to a hello world thing. And this is my hello world. This one, what it's doing is it kind of looks like XAML, but this is actually Blazor syntax. And this is doing a for each over every post that we get back. And the post list.razor, notice how this is a Razor file. This is not a XAML file. And this is one more option that you're going to get in .NET MAUI, hopefully. This one here is using a label, and it's passing a parameter down to display the title of the label. So when I run this, you will see the same exact app, but just done differently, done with Blazor. And it all works together with Xamarin Forms under the covers, right? So now this is a Blazor application. Same idea, we are pulling back the list of posts, but now this is rendered through Blazor. If you don't want to write XAML or Xamarin Forms, then this is one option for you. Now let me show you one more. Well, I'll try to show you two things. How about that before we end? Let me show you this one here. And all of these things, like some of this code is also up on my GitHub repo if you are needing to go and get it. I see some questions, but give me 8 more minutes and I'll try to answer them and show you as much as I can. So this is a new way of doing things. And this one here almost reads like XAML. It starts out XAML, but this is pretty much C#. So this is using the whole MVU pattern. This one here is a text box and it's bound to a count. This count is now a state. This is your model, and you don't have to keep it on the same file. This is like a demo application, super simple. But then as I increment the button, the value of that count goes up, which means it's already data bound to this text, so you know what's going to happen. So this looks different, and I'm giving you some variations of what XAML can be if you don't want to write straight up XAML. It is using the same renderers that Xamarin Forms is doing, but it's not actually Xamarin Forms. This is using a different runtime, different set of renderers that are universal, that are meant to work with Xamarin Forms and other things. So this one here, as I increment, you can see how fast it is. And this is MVU design pattern. So it's not MVVM like we're used to with XAML, just a different set of choices to play around with. OK, so let me see if I can close this. And I might be able to answer a couple of questions while I bring up Windows, because why not? OK, so while Windows is loaded up, I can quickly read a couple of questions. Or maybe Windows is going to be fast enough. OK. I don't know if anybody else runs Windows on a VM like I do. It works for the most part. The fan keeps on going sometimes. Ooh, didn't want to do that. OK, there you go. So let me show you 5 more minutes. Geez. OK, we are now dependent on Visual Studio doing its thing as fast as it can. Come on. We will give it just a couple of minutes. Not a couple of minutes, a few seconds to Visual Studio. So again, if you're doing XAML, it doesn't really matter, especially for Xamarin Forms, especially for Uno platform. You can use Visual Studio for Mac. You can use Visual Studio on Windows. It's the same experience. And the IntelliSense, everything is there. It's going to take a while, isn't it? Or maybe not. OK, that was fast. OK, I don't need you to load up that XAML, so you can go away. So what I'm trying to show you here is I can just run this real quick. Start. OK, well, that was pretty quick. OK, so what you see here, this is a WPF application. So we looked at Mac, and that was powered with XAML. Now this is a WPF desktop application, also powered with XAML, but not the WPF XAML. This is actually the Xamarin Forms XAML. And it's pulling back the same exact list of posts that we just saw with iOS. The reason it's working is in here, WPF is now just one more head that I support, in addition to iOS or Android or whatever. And it has Xamarin Forms, and it has this one little NuGet package that gives you the renderers for WPF that can take Xamarin Forms XAML and render it on WPF. Same exact code base, and it works on WPF. Now, let me show you. I got 4 minutes left. OK. Let me show you one last thing, if I can. And then we'll switch to Q&A if anyone wants to ask me something. OK. Now, this one here, let me just go ahead and run this, and I'll explain what it is while it's doing its thing. OK. This is using a thing called Uno platform, which I talked about. And you can get the templates for Visual Studio, so you can get file new project Uno platform. You can also do CLI. But what it's doing here is using one more head, and that is the WebAssembly head. So well, looks like this one is a little stuck, or maybe it will update sometime. I don't know why it's being slow. Oh, there we go. So you see this hello world? Now we are in the web stack, right? This is Edge, right? But we did not write any HTML. This is actually XAML, and it is not Silverlight. The reason it's working is this is UNO platform, and you'll notice the structure here. I mean, I have taken away a few projects, but when you say file new project, UNO platform, they give you Mac, they give you iOS, Android, Universal Windows Platform, and WASM. WASM is WebAssembly. So they're literally taking, this is the shared project. So if I open up this main page XAML, you will see Hello World right there, right? So the text block. So this is using Windows XAML, but then that Windows XAML can also go to WASM and run on a web application, right? So which is pretty sweet. Again, a couple of NuGet packages, and it does so. Okay, so I might show you one more thing in a URL, but let me shut down my Windows VM and then start reading out some of the things that you're saying. Go away. I got 2 minutes. There. Okay, so let me show you UNO platform. So this is the one that I just showed you last. And if you go out to UNO platform, they have a very nice thing here somewhere, right there, WebAssembly. So try it live. When you hit that button, it takes you into a playground where you get XAML on the left and you get runtime or like rendered XAML on the right. And it's just like Silverlight. And you can play with XAML. You can make things light up on a web browser, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, things have come a long way, and we were here. I'm going to close with the slides and then end there and read some questions. So again, we are living through a particularly difficult year and time, but as software developers, we have all the ammunition, be it XAML, be it C#, or if you want to do JavaScript, do your thing. Let's all make the world a better place in terms of the economies that we can drive and software that we can make. And I love you all. Sorry I cannot be with you all, but again, we all have to be safe, and hopefully you and your family are doing well and being happy and productive as much as you can. That's me again on social media, so if you need to get hold of me, that's where I'm at. Okay, and at this point, I can stop sharing and try to read. Okay, great presentation. Thank you. XAML tends to be a little verbose. Yes, absolutely right. But again, you get used to it. You have tools to help you out. Okay, Matt is saying thank you. Live demos, appreciate your knowledge. Thank you. I thought there was a question. There was a survey. Yes, please take that survey from Vanessa. MVU is great. Yes, I agree. Now, given some people come from a heavy MVVM background or XAML background, and they are not okay with MVU, and that's fine. It's not for everybody. It's an option. Okay, and I think, yeah, Joshua is trying to help out Dan. So, okay, all right. I am at time. I am happy to hang out here or in the main reception area if you need to ask me anything. But I want to thank you all for spending an hour or maybe like 45 minutes. I know it's lunchtime for you. I am also having a late lunch, so I will go have lunch now. But I appreciate every one of you. Thank you for coming to HDC. Thank you for hanging out and doing the best we can, learning remotely. And this is great. So thank you for having me, Vanessa and Itzel and everyone. I appreciate you, and I love you all. So thank you all.